Thank you both for that. Issue 2, the government's new 90-day right to sack. Is it a declaration of war against the unions or an Adam Smith free market workers' utopia? Phoebe, banning unions from the workplace, creating the pressures that will force workers to hand over their 4th week of holiday, gutting the training and education budgets for unions, forcing notes for any sick day, and expanding the 90-day right to sack to all companies. Is John Key the workers' hero?
I don't think you could say he's the workers' hero. He's attempting to be the employer's hero here with the notion that this is going to stimulate small businesses and the economy. I think the really interesting thing that people aren't talking about here is consumer confidence. Now, clearly having these sorts of policies towards workers is going to have an impact on consumer confidence. People aren't going to spend in the same way if you're worried about losing your job in the first 3 months. For me personally, I think it's a continuation of National's policies in the 1990s, where we had the 1984 Labor government come in, and that paved the way for a kind of breakdown in relations between the unions and the government, and then we end up with the Employment Contracts Act 1991, which weakened that even further. And I think we're seeing a return to this kind of aggressive policy with the notion that it will stimulate small businesses, but as I say, it's going to have broader economic impacts than that.
But John says that he's doing it for the workers.
Yes, he says he's doing it for the pizza guy.
He's doing it for his pizza guy.
He's doing it for his pizza guy.
I mean,
that was a really interesting example because the pizza guy seemed to have the issue of being an immigrant.
Yes.
You know, and many immigrants in New Zealand, when they're applying for jobs, the issue is actually racism rather than the idea of a trial period. Right. I really don't think it's going to make that much difference for workers. I think it's going to really affect people's confidence when they're applying for jobs.
Selwyn, the Department of Labour report National used to defend these moves, which only asked the bosses if they liked having the power of God, actually says that there was no evidence these probation periods work. How does the government sell this as helping the unemployment rate?
Well, I think if you look at it, it can't sell it. You know, unemployment is going to actually be there because we've got a failing part or component of the New Zealand economy. What this is really all about is trying to realign. The National Party is trying to realign itself, like Phoebe said, where it left off in the 1990s. The Employment Contracts Act was a union-busting bill, and what it's trying to do here is to tweak this area of the 90-day probationary period, but also move in regulation that's going to exclude union representatives for workers who are going to be affronted by this particular policy of the 90 days.
Phoebe, the unions seem to think that they could be friends with National at the very beginning, and were pretty mute over the original 90-day right to sack because it wasn't aimed at their members. Do the unions have the actual ability to fight John Key?
Yes, well, this is an interesting thing. I mean, I think there's been a real sort of turn to the right within, New Zealand generally, and part of this is actually the youth. I think National got much more of a youth vote than they would have last time. You've got youth that haven't lived through the 1990s. I think they had to be quiet at the beginning until National came out in sort of full of force, but I think they will begin to fight these policies a lot harder. Whether they will win, I don't know.
Helen Kelly from CTU, Andrew Little for EPMU, have they finally acknowledged John Key's not their mate?
I think they have finally acknowledged John Key is not their mate.
Can they do anything? I mean, are these lazy, fat unions, are they really going to be able to fight? I mean, can they call a general strike? Are they going to call a general strike?
Well, I think we may see the beginnings of more strikes. I mean, I think the situation is already difficult for unions. I mean, there are plenty of examples where people actually feel uncomfortable seeing the union in their own workplace anyway. So these sorts of measures are going to make it even harder for employees to access their union. I would like to say that they could win, but again, looking back at the 1990s and the effect that this did have on the unions and union rates and membership, I think this is going to be a difficult battle for the unions.
Matt McCartan called it right at the beginning, didn't he? Unite were one of the few unions out there right from the beginning fighting this, a couple of the handfuls, but the larger ones thought they could cut a deal. That's evaporated, hasn't it?
I think that has well and truly evaporated.
Selwyn, is this declaration of war on the workers by National really aimed at raising funds from the Auckland business mafia who bankrolled the last election? Nothing boosts the war chest through anonymous donations into the Wairemata Trust than some old-fashioned union bashing, does it?
Well, it is. It's looking after its stakeholder groups. We all know what National really represents. In an election year, it can realign itself to that centrist area, representing the New Zealand worker, the Kiwi way, but we know it doesn't do that. It represents a very, very, very narrow part of the New Zealand identity, and it is trying to actually appease that at the moment. It is obviously, going to make sure that by the time it finishes this term in office, it has laid the foundation of more things to come in the next term.
Are the unions going to be able to win this? Do they have the strength?
Well, the unions that you've mentioned there, the big unions are affiliated to the Labour Party.
Yep.
It's really a fight on those types of terms. You mentioned the Unite Union.
Yep.
Unite Union is not affiliated to a political party that exists inside Parliament at this time. It is there more closely positioned to its workers and its members in that sense. So is there going to be some sort of movement that develops? My instinct would be it's got to get much worse yet. But
Right.
all the foundation has been laid by the National Party for that to happen.
The unions might actually be reminded they're for the workers, will they?
Well, this is one thing where the National Party and its decisions this year is starting to enable us all to get an idea of what it really represents.
Right.
Every time we start to get a sense of that and the public reacts negatively to it, National then retrenches back to its safe centrist kind of area.
Right.
But we know now what it really is driving at inside the party.
Phoebe, the 90-day right to sack. Who wins? Who loses? Why?
Employers, but I think that there's even issues there in terms of the way that they win, because I think this is going to have an effect on people's workplaces and, productivity. I mean, we all have to get along. Who loses? Certainly the workers.
Selwyn, 90-day, who wins? Who loses? Why?
I don't think anyone wins. I think everybody is a loser in this. It comes in, the workers are going to suffer in a sense. It's a revolving door policy that's designed to allow employers to get rid of its excess staff at times when actual demand for that staff's labour drops off. Like in the seasonal adjustments area, also in the times leading up to Christmas, employers and retailers need people on the ground. This gives them the opportunity to get rid of them. The other losers are the National Party. Really, this type of policy, it should have learnt from the 1990s. In the end, actually chucks it out of office. If it had any strategic political sense, it would look after the most dynamic sector of the New Zealand society, and that is centre and the worker, and centre-left area.
Thank you, panel. Coming up after the break, I don't want to sound reasonable, ladies and gentlemen, but shouldn't someone be asking how exactly will arming our police force make things safer? Citizen A is back after the break.